Talking today about anxiety and impulse control disorders. So what are anxiety disorders? First, anxiety is a general state of apprehension or psychological tension, and there are several different examples of specific anxiety disorders, and we'll talk about each one of these now in greater detail. So first, we have generalized anxiety disorder, abbreviated GAD. With generalized anxiety disorder, just like the name suggests, you don't just worry about one thing. Your worry is diffuse. It is generalized. You worry about things like your family, you worry about your health, you worry about your money, you worry about your job security, you worry about your relationships, you worry about everything. It's basically this idea of worrying about worrying. And one of the hallmarks of generalized anxiety disorder is that even when things actually start to improve, so let's say that you were, really worried about your finances during the stock market collapse and the housing market crisis of recent years. You were really worried about your finances, and you had good reason to be worried about them. But even as things continue to improve within the general market, you are still worrying about all of those financial related problems. So with generalized anxiety disorder, then, it's the state of excessive worry about multiple different things, okay? The experience then, where does it come from? So there is some evidence that people who are chronically anxious, so people who are always anxious about something, they might have a history in childhood of being able to not being able to control or predict what's going to happen in their environment. And so then this worry is perhaps, born out of necessity. They can't control what's going on, and so they feel like they're powerless, and the only thing that they can actually do is worry. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. With post-traumatic stress disorder, basically what happens is a person experiences some kind of traumatic event. So oftentimes the traumatic event is a life-threatening event. Maybe you thought you were going to die. It can be traumatic events related to things like being raped, being in a car accident. Our service women, so men and women who have been in active duty combat, oftentimes come back after their tour of duty, and they have post-traumatic stress because of the things that they have been exposed to in war zones. So with the post-traumatic stress disorder then, you basically relive the trauma. So this can happen in a number of different ways. Very common is for individuals to have dreams, to have nightmares about the traumatic event, to basically experience this numbing. They're not the same person that they were before the event. They're kind of emotionally cut off from other individuals. And then also this kind of physiological arousal, or this physiological tension, where they're kind of hyper vigilant. It's basically like your body is on attack mode all of the time, just in case something happens where you need to be mobilized for action very, very quickly. With PTSD, again, this is a very common experience. A lot of people do experience post-traumatic stress. You may experience it immediately after a trauma, or sometimes it can lay dormant for a while and then resurface months or years later. The good thing about PTSD is that there are a lot of very effective treatments for this. It's basically just, individuals overcoming the stigma to seek help for this disorder. Okay, so panic disorder, another anxiety disorder. The hallmark of panic disorder is the experience of recurring panic attacks. A panic attack is basically, you feel like you're having a heart attack. You feel like, you're suffocating, like your heart's going to pop out of your chest. You feel like you're going to die. Rapid breathing and dizziness accompany this. So it is also common for individuals to experience panic attacks. Maybe you've experienced one before. When does panic attacks develop into panic disorder? So if you look down here at the bottom, it's about the interpretation. So if you have a panic attack and you interpret this as, oh my God, I'm dying, this is more likely then to lead to panic disorder. If, however, you interpret it as, okay, my heart's beating really fast, I'm freaking out a little bit right now, I'm not dying, it's just stress, it's going to pass, that makes it less likely that you will develop panic disorder. Oftentimes, panic disorder co-occurs with something called agoraphobia. And with agoraphobia, it translates to a fear of public spaces. So basically what happens, the individual has a panic attack in some kind of a public space. So let's say you go grocery shopping, you have a panic attack in the grocery store. You're by yourself and you think, oh my God, I'm dying right now. I don't know anyone here. There is no one here to help me. I'm just going to die right here. This is terrible. So you then start to associate being in these public places with the possibility that you're going to have another panic attack. So this is classical conditioning in action, right? You start to associate the experience of the panic attack with being in public spaces. And so then over time, you stop going out. You stop leaving your house and going out into these public spaces because you are so scared that if you go out in public, you're going to have another panic attack. So a lot of times what we see is that individuals who have panic disorder are homebound. They're like hermits. They don't want to leave their house because they are petrified that they will have another panic attack. So I want you also to make sure that you watch the video that goes along with this so you can see a real life example of a woman who has panic disorder with agoraphobia and see what it's like for her to do something as mundane as going to the grocery store. Okay, so I want you to quiz yourself here, so pause this, take the quiz, and the correct answer is B, panic disorder. Good. Okay, so let's talk about another anxiety disorder, phobias. So with phobias, there are several different kinds of phobias. With specific phobia, you have some kind of exaggerated, unrealistic fear of a specific situation, activity, or object. People can have phobias of almost anything. So you might have a phobia of spiders, you might have a needle phobia, you might have a phobia of clowns, but it is this exaggerated, unrealistic fear of something very specific. Social phobia then is this exaggerated, unrealistic fear where you have severe anxiety in social situations, particularly when you think that you are being observed or evaluated by other people. So in looking at these examples here, especially things like speaking in public or performing for an audience, many people have those kinds of fears, right? Speaking in public is one of the most common phobias. However, the difference is with social phobia, it becomes so debilitating, right? This fear that you will actually avoid these situations and it can get in the way. So let's say that, for example, you have to take a public speaking course in order to graduate with your bachelor's degree. Your social phobia is so bad that you have signed up for public speaking multiple times, but you drop the course every time. Every single time, and it's actually preventing you from finishing your degree. That's when it becomes problematic, right? Having a little bit of anxiety when you get up to give a speech in front of people is perfectly normal, and you can actually mobilize that, to make your speech better. But it's when it gets in the way of, you fulfilling your regular obligations that it becomes problematic. Okay, so impulse control disorders. There are several impulse control disorders. We are only going to talk about obsessive compulsive disorder. So in the DSM-4, obsessive compulsive disorder was classified as an anxiety disorder. However, in the new DSM, they have changed it to an impulse control disorder. So the hallmark features of obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, are repetitive, persistent thoughts, or the obsessions, and repetitive, ritualized behavior, or the compulsions. Okay, so basically you have a person who has these persistent thoughts, these obsessive thoughts, and in order to calm the impulse, to calm the anxiety that is produced by these obsessive thoughts, they perform these ritualized, compulsive behaviors. So very common obsessions are thoughts about germs, about cleanliness. So let's say that, you have a person who is very, very fearful of germs, right? They have these obsessive thoughts that germs are going to take over their lives. And so to address those impulsive, obsessive thoughts, they engage in compulsive behavior of washing their hands 25 times a day. And they'll wash their hands so much that their hands are actually cracked and bleeding. But still, they'll continue to wash their hands because they have that impulse to do it. Individuals who have obsessive compulsive disorder understand that this ritual, this behavior, they understand that it's irrational. They understand that it does not make sense. But they feel so much guilt if they don't perform the compulsive behaviors that they have to do these behaviors in order to address the impulse, in order to address the guilt. Okay, so apply this stuff now. If you have persistent thoughts that gremlins are sabotaging any airplane you are on or will be on, then you have a blank. If you cannot stop asking for more water during flights, then you have a blank. Okay, so the first one has to deal with the thoughts, right? So we automatically know that that is an obsession, right? The thoughts are the obsessions, and then the behavior, asking for more water, is a compulsion. So the answer is number 1, an obsession and a compulsion.